Our next and final guest of this morning's presentation is Dutch photographer Kadir van Lohuizen from Noor Agency, and he will be presenting his work Wasteland, and he's also the very first winner of the environment category. Welcome, Kadir.
Good morning. Thank you for being here this early. I'm going to show you my last project, which I'm very happy and proud that it won a first prize. Very happy also that it won a prize in the category environment, which is new this year, and I think it's a category which was really needed, is needed in this time. It's a project I worked on for about 1.5 years, and it came about because I was working on a previous project, which some of you might know, which was about the rising sea level. And I was coming to very remote islands in the Pacific, and every time I would find plastic on the beaches, which was definitely not from there. So I started to do some research, and I actually realized myself that I didn't know actually anymore what was happening with the waste. In Amsterdam, the garbage truck comes on the Monday and the Thursday. You put your bag on the curb, and it's gone. Looks clean, and it doesn't seem to be a problem. Which, as you might know, is a huge problem, because the world is producing more and more waste. So I had this idea to go to different cities, and the criteria I used was that it had to be a city over 15 million people, and I wanted to have like a global spread. So I went to Jakarta, I went to Tokyo, I went to Lagos, I went to Sao Paulo, and I went to Amsterdam. Not really 15 million people, but the capital of one of the most populated countries in the world, and it had to be a European city as well. It was maybe one of the most difficult projects I worked on, because almost every single image required permission. New York was probably the hardest, because the whole industry is privatized. But I started in Jakarta. This is the Bay of Jakarta. These are artificial islands, basically plastic. You can actually stand on them. The problem that Jakarta is facing is that most of the waste goes to a landfill, a garbage dump, a garbage belt. And they are full. A mountain of waste, which is really dangerous. There are regular avalanches of waste where people get killed. You know probably the images of people working on these dumps, like here. It's people who live there as well. And basically, you know, I mean, we have kind of a negative connotation with people who work there. But they actually they sort of became the heroes of the story, because if those people were not there and sorting plastic, textile, paper, and collected for recycling and selling it, it would have been full a long time ago. What was also difficult is that I had to find a way, because the problem with waste is that it looks like waste. So it doesn't matter if you're in New York or Jakarta or in Lagos or in Amsterdam. So I had to find a way that, you know, in the edits I discovered there was repetition, because it looks similar. So I really tried to find a balance, and I also tried to see if there was any solution to the problem. So Tokyo, which we will see in a bit, is probably the best example, and New York might be the worst. It was, as I said, the problem was that it's all privatized. So what I had to get statistics, you know, how much waste is actually produced, how much is being recycled, how much is sorted. And it was incredibly difficult to get the figures. Like Amsterdam was till the last moment they couldn't give me the figure. It was about to run in the Washington Post. And really, like 1 hour before deadline, and they couldn't give me the figure, and the Washington Post called me and they said, if Amsterdam doesn't give the figure, we will publish that Amsterdam is the only city which doesn't have their figures. So it really went to the mayor's office, and 10 minutes before the deadline, the figure appeared. This is plastic recycling. Plastic is obviously probably the biggest problem at the moment. You know, it feels like we can't do without plastic, although 50 years ago there was no real plastic. Yes, plastic can be useful. You know, it's not just plastic bags, but the whole industry, the shopping bag industry, the one-time use industry, is a huge problem. Because it's being done like this, so it's very toxic, and the quality of many of the plastic bags is really bad. So they are really one-time use. Some cities like Amsterdam and Sao Paulo, they have pretty sophisticated sorting systems. They can sort the plastic. They use sensors, but for example, they can't recognize black plastic. So black plastic in general gets trashed and burned. As I said, New York is problematic. New York is problematic because there's no city in the world which produces more waste than New York. They produce about 33 million tons a year, which is twice as much as the number 2. And the number 2 is Mexico, which is much bigger than New York. All the landfills are full in New York State. So it's being exported either internationally or it's being exported to neighboring US states. This is in Pennsylvania. This is one day of the Bronx and Queens. And this is the incinerator. So New York burns most of its waste. The problem of burning, especially in New York, is that there are sophisticated incinerators, like in Tokyo, where they have sophisticated filtering system and they're supposed to be almost clean. In the US, that's not the case. So they're usually in poor neighborhoods, and it's pretty toxic. Anyone who's been in New York has seen people like this. They call the canners. They are people who are collecting PET bottles and cans for recycling. And the problem is that it's supposed to be a crime because you steal property. What I didn't know is that for a can or a PET bottle, if you buy something in the shop, you pay a deposit of 5 cents. But it's so little that people don't make an effort to return it. So that's how they collect it, and they sell it for recycling. This was one of the guys I worked with. He started a cooperative to try to protect themselves and that they would be able to continue to work. They called it Sure We Can, which was before Obama. And again, I mean, they are like, without these people, the problem would have been even larger. New York is not you know, there's cities in the US which are much worse than New York. I mean, New York with the mayor, they have a goal of zero waste, which I find very difficult to see how they achieve this. This is plastic being brought to one of the few recycling facilities in New York, which was 2 days of Queens and Bronx plastic. As you know, I mean, if you go in the US, you go to the supermarket, they almost put every item in a plastic bag and you walk out with 10 bags. There is an attempt to put the deposit on plastic bags like we have in Europe, but so far it's been unsuccessful in New York and other cities in the US. People just don't want to do this. What I didn't realize was that the way we move plastic around the world. So, you know, I mean, a lot of the plastic which comes from Europe and the US is going to China, was going to China. I'll explain you later. Tokyo, which is the most populated city, 36 million people. Those are the train pushers. So at rush hour, they push you in the train so that you're not late for work. As I said, I mean, Tokyo was probably the best example. Most things are being separated and recycled. So people have in their houses, they have like 5 bins for paper and organic and plastic, etc. In Amsterdam, the city says, well, it's not possible. People live, it's too small where people live in Amsterdam, the apartments. In Tokyo, they live approximately on half the size. So I believe it's possible. Tokyo has one landfill left, and they've calculated that in 50 years it's full and there's no other space to so they're completely calculating now, but they did land reclamations for landfills already, and they can't anymore. So it's in their own interest to recycle as much as possible. So mainly, this is the incinerator of Tokyo. So most of the garbage that goes into the incinerator is organic. So it's less toxic. I mean, at the same time, organic waste could be used for compost. But it's still a lot better than in the US and Europe and Asia. So the yellow bags that's organic. They turn the waste around so that it doesn't catch fire. So this is they use plastic to produce fibers, which are used for car interiors. So as I said, I mean, almost all of the cities I've been, every day there were container ships with plastic being shipped to China for recycling. So China is the biggest importer of plastic and paper until the 1st of January this year, because China decided that they don't want to import any raw plastics anymore, because they have enough of themselves, they have enough plastic themselves, so they don't need it. So there's a huge invisible problem coming up here in Europe and in the US, because most of our plastic was going there. And we don't know what to do with it. So there's huge mountains of plastic are piling up now, and what we do now is that we burn it. So it doesn't go for recycling, and I don't know what's going to happen. So yeah, as you see, it was obviously most of it was photography, but I shot a lot of video as well. I used a drone, I used a 360 camera, I used a Steadicam. So this is the landfill, by the way, in Tokyo. So it looks a little bit different. This was last year in Amsterdam. This was one of the storages of household waste which went up in flames, which happens very often. And I spoke later to one of the guys, and I said, because they said they can't extinguish it, so it has to burn by itself in a controlled way. That's how they put it. And he said, actually, this is happening because people throw away lithium batteries, and they inflame, and then the trouble starts. Amsterdam also has a special service from the city which collects bicycles from the canals. So I went with these guys. They have a special boat with sensors, so they can see the bicycles in the canal. And Amsterdam collects about 20,000 bicycles from the canal every year. So they're often being stolen and pushed in or whatever. And I said, what's the second thing you find in the canals? And they said, safes, money safes. So I said, why safes? He said, well, they steal them, they empty them, and they throw them in the canal. So this is the incinerator, which is quite close to here. It is, compared to the US, it's a pretty clean system. The problem still remains that it's being burnt, where I started to realize that almost everything we throw away can actually be recycled or reused. These incinerators are often private companies, so they have to keep their ovens burning, so it's not really in their interest that waste is being reduced. Amsterdam, the incinerator is so big, there's 6 ovens. By the way, this is one day of drinking in Amsterdam. There's 6 ovens at the incinerator. We don't produce enough waste, so we are importing household waste from the UK. So there's a whole line of trucks every day coming from England with English waste, which is being burned here. And obviously, it's business. I mean, waste is a huge business. There's huge profits are being made. So bringing in foreign waste is actually very profitable. So Amsterdam tried to claim that they are a pretty good example in the world. I mean, we are not the worst, but we are absolutely not the best, because what's in the garbage bag goes into the oven. So the only thing we take out is afterwards, with a magnet, we take out the metals. There will be a new sorting system now. The problem is that we produce too much, so that the sorting system, which can take out plastic and other stuff from the garbage bag, we have too much, so they can't handle, so they can only sort out and recycle a certain percentage. That's your car. Scrap metal. Another big business. So this is the port of Amsterdam. There's huge piles of scrap metal, and it's mainly being exported to Turkey. In New York, I tried to, because I was like For my great environmental stories, I have the worst footprint of probably any of you in this room. So I was wondering what's happening with all the stuff that's coming out of the planes. The food, you know, I mean, you still get these one-time use headphones. I didn't succeed with Delta and JFK in New York, but I did succeed in the end with KLM and Schiphol. KLM is trying to do their best. So when you fly on a European flight, they try to sort the plastic and the cans. But if you fly intercontinental, due to health regulations, everything goes into the incinerator. So this is coming from one flight, the lunch. And actually on European flights, you don't get much anymore. So it's producing a lot less trash than on the intercontinental flights. Cruise ships. That's a whole city with waste. Sao Paulo, 22 million people or so. They're not doing so bad, actually. This is the landfill. Why I wanted to go, although visually it was quite challenging, Sao Paulo, I don't know exactly why, but why I wanted to go there was that the scavengers, so people who collect from garbage bins or wherever, is a recognized profession in Sao Paulo. So they are organized like here in cooperatives, and it's actually working quite well, and they're protected by the law. So this is the sorting center, which they have to do manually often. Yeah, well, Lagos. Lagos was a challenge. Incredibly apocalyptic, fascinating city. Together with Jakarta, this is the biggest landfill. Same story, thousands of people live and work here. But it caught fire 2 weeks ago. So they closed the landfill now, so Lagos really doesn't know what to do with the waste now. Because the problem is they can't extinguish it, because it keeps on burning. Obviously, waste, if you put it on a landfill, produces methane as well. Yeah, this is a scene which happens every minute on the landfill, and it's like if a money saver arrives. So I had this like, you know, I mean, I thought maybe this is how we all gonna live in the future, because, you know, it looks very chaotic, but every person you see has a task. So one is looking for plastic, one is looking for paper. So what looks completely chaos is actually really well organized. So it's really like a city where it's all kinds of businesses where you can where people are buying plastic and other waste. Plastic bottles. So there's small companies which are more like NGOs, which actually work pretty well. So if you separate your plastic and your paper, and you have enough, they give you coins. So if you have enough, you get like something for the household in return, some kind of utility or electronic. So it actually pushes people to do so. So it's paper recycling. They produce toilet paper for the whole of West Africa. And then plastic becomes plastic again. This is can recycling. So they collect the cans, but they burn them they melt them in open pits. Indian companies often. And they're coming to Nigeria because there are not many regulations, so they make good money on this. But it's a toxic environment to work in.
Thank you so much, Kadir. Take the microphone with you. Are there questions from the audience for Kadir?
Oh, by the way, I'll be, afterwards I'll sign a book, and this is the Washington Post, which was actually great what they did, because they printed a whole supplement. So they gave me 2,000, so there's a bunch there which you can take for free.
Thank you. Any questions for Kadir? Yes, I see one there. If you want to have a...
Kadir, did you do this whole project by yourself, or did you collaborate with someone, or?
Well, often I initiate. Well, I started myself. It was my own idea. It was a difficult project to pitch, because I pitched it to several magazines and newspapers before, and actually no one was really interested, because it's like, you know, we assume that we know. So luckily I got a grant from Nikon, which made it possible that it covered most expenses. And then I contacted the Washington Post. And that was actually a really great collaboration, because, you know, I mean, I think they did it beautiful online, and they did this special supplement, which was an insert and came out on Thanksgiving, which I believe is America's most wasteful weekend.
More questions, anybody? I see no hands. Kadir, tell me, so this is a very new category, the environment. Do you think it was really needed? Are you happy that WordPress Photo added this environment category? Does it reflect on the general field?
Yeah, you know, I mean, everything we are facing now regarding the environment, climate change, are such urgent matters that, I mean, before WordPress had a category which was called Nature and Environment, and then for some reason the environment dropped off. So obviously you could submit in other categories like contemporary issues, but you know, I'm really happy that there's a special category now which is dedicated to topics and issues like this.
And I read that the Netherlands has the very first plastic-free aisle in the supermarket. Do you think we're at a turning point when it comes to plastic and awareness?
I hope so, you know, but the thing is that, as I said, you know, plastic is useful in some products, but it's the single-time use which is a huge issue. And, you know, I mean, we seem to be addicted to it. You know, we think that we can't do without. So, you know, I mean, the good thing about this issue is that you know, if you talk about bigger issues about climate change, but with waste, I mean, we are all personally responsible for what we throw away and what we don't. So you know, we could get there, but it probably starts with education. You know, I mean, we are probably our generation is probably not able to change their minds anymore, it seems. But kids are.
So the solution is in the next generation.
I hope so. But you know, I mean, we are really drowning in our own garbage if we don't act. And that was a pretty shocking thing to discover, because you know, as I said, the amount what New York produces is just astounding. So, you know, I mean, we look like cities like at Jakarta and Lagos, and it's visible, right? So we think they produce a lot. But, you know, I mean, New York produces 15 times more than Lagos, with about the same population.
And nobody knows, or nobody...
Well, it became, you know, we're very good in hiding it now, you know, it's clean, you know, unless the garbage goes on strike, then we realize. But otherwise, it's like a completely hidden problem.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing your story, Kadir. And, questions? No. Okay, and do collect the copy of the Washington Post. It's at the bookstore. Thank you so much, Kadir.
At the post office.
Okay.